So my friend asked me if I could come to his shop. He has a really nice performance shop, a dyno and everything, and come check out this 2004 Mustang GT that came in that had some issues. The car hadn't run for about 8 years. It's a fresh build, but it's got some problems. It's a Kenne car with a fully built engine and everything you can imagine on this car. My friend had done a compression test and he wrote the numbers on the tape. You can see some of those numbers were pretty low. There were some that were normal, but there were quite a few low numbers in there. It's an interior upgrade package car with the silver trim around the radio, but the seats obviously are racing seats, so they're not there anymore. The car has a Celine spoiler, which I really like. I think that's great for a GT. Smoke taillights, FR500 wheels, good looking car. And this car had a lot done to it. I mean, no expense spared. Looks like a fun car. So the story was the son was working on it a long time ago. Now the dad has it and he brought it to the shop to get it tuned with the fresh built engine, but it had some problems. So my friend offered to work on it. So you can see it has sway bars, tubular K-member, transmission, coilovers, just everything. And so it has a lot of wiring and stuff going around the transmission and the headers. It even has a very large wire there for the starter that was actually starting to burn through. So luckily we caught that. And I did some documentation here with the video. This is how the starter is and what wires go where. And so I'm going to be tearing this car apart. He asked if I would come work on it because he's really busy. So here you can see the AC compressors hanging there. We're going to drop the engine out the bottom, hopefully leave the AC totally charged and intact. And so I started taking some lines off and kind of mostly taking the video to show where everything goes and what lines we're dealing with here. And this is all stuff I could look under my Mustang and figure out, but sometimes it's better, especially with a highly modified car, to look at all this. So wiring everywhere, got some grounds to the front of the block, which is unusual, and it has the normal ground there to the chassis as well. So just lots of wires here and stuff out of the ordinary. Here's an intercooler pump for the Kenne system. It is an intercooled system. So I'm just kind of documenting how that's all wired and plugged in, and my friend just made the bracket on the dyno. He said it wasn't even working, the intercooler pump. So here's the transmission fluid draining out. And yeah, this is going to be a project here. We're going to get going here with this. And so my goal was to get it out in one day and stuff. So looking underneath here, you can see, deep sump oil pan. I mean, this car has everything. Long tube headers, nice exhaust. I don't know if the transmission has anything done to it. It's a TR3650 5-speed, which would have come in the car, but it might have had some work done to it as well. You've got the exhaust, you've got coilovers in the back, lots of suspension work, and tubular control arms. Looks like a sump tank with, I'm sure, a high power pump and everything. So this car is one of those cars that when you get in there and start looking around, you think, wow, they spent a lot of money on this car, and they just went all out. I mean, no expense spared. So here we go with the throttle body off. Some of this was already taken apart, and when he did the compression test and stuff, he was already looking in there. So this is how it started when I got to it. So we're going to get going here, and we'll start tearing it down, and we're going to drop it out the bottom and stuff. So got a cold drink, and we'll get going here. So this battery harness gave me a lot of trouble here. These break off, and when you just try to unbolt them sometimes, and I was aware of that, and so I was very careful when I started on that. I could see this was tampered with before, and so I slowly worked on it, and I was able to wedge this bolt in here and hold it because the backside just kept spinning, and so I didn't want to break it out of the plastic box or ruin the connection. And I've had friends do that, and so right when I saw this, I knew to be careful with it, and I was able to break that loose, and now we can get these power cables off of here. And so that was something that I had to be very careful with. I didn't want anything to to be damaged on that end, because that's the last thing you need once you get it all back together, is have it not running. But anyway, yeah, see, that just spins freely, but I didn't break the kind of pot metal bracket around it. So here, looking on the back of the blower and everything, this is all stuff that's new to me. It's different than my Torque Tech Supercharger kit or my supercharged Cobras. You have the intercooler inlets and outlets on the back of the blower here, so that's kind of interesting. And I basically wanted to take this video and document everything that I see here and where it all goes, because there's just so many hoses and loom and stuff back here that's all foreign to me on this setup. So you go around here, and there's I'm following this main line here, and this goes to the tank for the intercooler, and so the other one's on the other side, and it goes down on the other side of the valve cover. We'll look at that here. And basically, this is such useful information to go back and look at when you're working on a car that's highly modified. So here's where the other one goes. It goes through there into the heat exchanger. Here we have a PVC line that went to a catch can. There's where the heat exchanger and intercooler pump hose goes. It goes down here to the back side of that other branched off area. So we got throttle and cruise control brackets here. We've got vacuum lines. We've got this is like a vacuum hose here that goes to the back of the blower. We've got another little vacuum line, and it has a screw in one side. That was already disconnected when I got here. Then you have the heater core lines. You have that top one here that goes to the bottom of the lower intake manifold of the supercharger. And then the other heater core line goes to the bracket behind the blower, which goes to a tube that runs all the way under the valley to the water pump. So on my Torque Tech kit, that was replaced with a rubber hose, but I noticed the metal hose was still there, the metal line that goes from the water pump to the heater core on that side. So basically, just kind of getting a good overview of what all this is, because it's all going to go back together soon, right? So now the battery had this cable here. This is that big main power, and right there on the headers where near the steering shaft is where it was burning through. It was singed pretty bad, so luckily that didn't catch on fire. We've got some brake booster lines here for the Hydro Boost. And we got the alternator that's on backwards with the Kenne Bell kit. You spin it around backwards so the pulley's facing the other way, because the supercharger pulley is now where the alternator used to be. So I'm kind of just showing what bolts hold this thing on, and I did put most of the nuts and bolts back where they came from as soon as I removed the part I needed to. I like doing that. So we're getting it ready to drop down with the tubular K-member here on jack stands and the transmission on a transmission jack. Take a second here and walk around and look at some of these cars. This is my friend's Trans Am. He's had it for a long time. My brother Danny Johnson drove this open headers for next to a police officer once at a gas station. Kind of a funny old story. This is a beautiful 69 Mach 1. And the car has some stuff done to it, and it's a little modified. It has the Mach 1 seats with the red stripe on them. It has like a Boss 429 hood scoop. It's a very beautiful car, and it's the guy who owns the shop, owns all these cars in this showroom section here. And he wants to coyote swap this car with a Whipple, supposedly, in a 6R80. We're going to see if that happens. There's Boss on the side, but it's technically a Mach 1 from what I understand. A beautiful car. There's my friend's Camaro. Here's a Corvette, I believe. It's an LS swapped resto mod. But this is just a beautiful car. You see stuff like this in here, and you're like, wow, this is a really, really nice car. Silver is so classy on these types of cars. This Corvette's beautiful, and so just something that's sitting there, and I just kind of wanted to show it off a little bit and And then, yeah, looking at the badge here, it says Supercharged, so I'm guessing it has the LS with the blower, but I didn't open the hood because I'm respectful not to touch other people's stuff. So here's the GT. Let's get back to work. We got the engine dropping out of it here, just watching all the lines and the harnesses, clutch cable. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to watch out for. You don't want to snag things. I joke with my friend and say things like, you know, we're testing the tensile strength of any wire that's still connected. But all joking aside, it came out very nicely. And, you know, this was a little bit of a learning curve. I've always pulled them out the top. I've always done it on jack stands and an engine hoist. But in this case, we have a lift. And, you know, so just under there checking everything. And I did want to go a little faster than we were going, but it was a learning curve to get under and look at what needs to stay. And, you know, like usually when I pull it out the top, the AC compressor drops below it all and I pull it out, but this case the AC compressor had to come above it. So there's just a lot of things that you have to consider when you do it a different way. And so I wanted to go slow as well and not just strip bolts or break things. You know, this is not my car, so you know, but I treat it like it is mine. But anyway, we got to the point where we tried to get the numbers off the camshafts, and you wouldn't believe how hard it is. I mean, these numbers didn't come back as anything. I mean, we did find a forum where somebody had put that on there and asked what it was, and nobody knew. Nobody could identify them, and so I'm not sure what kind they are. The guy said it had trick flow heads, but it looks like Ford castings, so I mean, just hard to really know. The heads are definitely ported, and it definitely has aftermarket cams. You can see the scribe marks in there, and those could just be for cataloging purposes and not part numbers per se. My comp cams had something similar like that on there, so basically it's kind of hard to decide. So I went home for the day, drove the GT, really enjoyed driving it. See, that was perfect, you know, this car sat out, it got rained on. My other cars didn't have to. It's outside anyway. Worked out. So the next day I was going to go back and work on the GT, but there was going to be some time between. You know, we were going to start a little bit later in the morning, and I was up real early the next morning, and I just wanted to take my Cobra for a drive. So deep into a project, it's nice to go drive around your nice car that runs perfect and enjoy it. Right, that was fun. Back in the GT, going to the shop again. There's a yellow Z06, cool car. So back here with the engine out and everything, and you know, a fresh night's sleep. I'm ready to go on this some more and have some fun with this. I was actually pretty excited for this project when my friend told me about it, and you know, the first day I was just really pumped up and you know, running full throttle, and so I really tend to burn myself out like that because I get so excited. But time to take the supercharger off, and you know, after a good night rest and ready to go the next day, it feels a lot better. Sometimes you need to walk away from a project and stuff, but here's the whole blower, lower intake manifold and supercharger all together, so that went off very easily. You know, I actually noticed the hardware was kind of short for that, like the intake manifold bolts didn't seem very long and stuff. So there's the supercharger. Friend had already removed the passenger side valve cover when he was looking for broken stuff, and so I took all the hardware off of the driver's side valve cover, got that all off, and just started to tear down. We were going to take the headers off, but they were really hard to get to the hardware for some reason. The tubular K-member was a little bit in the way as well, and didn't want to take the motor mounts off unless we had to. And so I looked it over and I said, you know what, if we're taking the heads off, then why don't we just take off the heads and then take the exhaust off when we can you know, get it away from everything. Then we don't have to take off the motor mounts and hold the engine up with a hoist or anything. So I got all the timing bolts off, and you know, got the dampener broken loose, and then I'm using the tool to get it off there. So that came off pretty nicely. And you know, this is all a fresh build. It's really too bad that it had a problem, because it's all new and it's all nice and it's all expensive stuff. But I noticed, you know, as I went through here and looked over the hardware for the timing set and stuff, I put number 1 to top dead center, and I drew a timing mark. The other dot was on the sprocket. But I noticed that the timing looked to be 180 degrees off on the cams, and so that might be part of the problem here. So the car had a few cylinders that had 0 compression, one low, like 5 psi, and then one that was like 160. So he said, why don't we retime the engine correctly and see if that all comes back? But as we got into it, we figured out there might be some more problems. I popped off all the followers so we can spin the cams freely, and I was looking at this sprocket. It actually has this little spacer here, which is kind of interesting. I don't remember seeing that before on mine. I mean, it might just be an aftermarket piece, but I drew marks on the chains because they did not have colored links. I don't know what brand timing set this is, but usually one of the links is different. But look, one cam moves, the other cam is frozen. And like, I could turn it, but it was just hard to turn. Like, the engine obviously wouldn't have any problem doing it, so it was spinning in there. But I was like, okay, we have some bigger problems here. So I went ahead and I got the chains ready, and I marked them so that they'd be ready to go next time. So basically, you mark the top link, and then when you run the 2 chains together all the way down, there will be one link at the bottom. And so you grab that one link at the bottom, flip it over, and color that one too. So now the 2 opposite sides of the chain have one extra link, and that's where you set up the timing marks. And so basically you just can choose any link you want, because they're not colored in this case like they usually should be. And so you just mark one, and then you put them in rows of 2 next to each other all the way down until you get to that opposite end where there's one link, and then color it in. So we're going to take off this cam cap first. My friend said start by loosening the cams and work your way forward. I just thought it'd be kind of interesting while I was here to show what it looks like with the oil level. That's what an oil pan looks like when it has oil in it. Now, this is a deep sump tank too, so I don't know how much oil they put in it. It probably should take 8 to 10 quarts or something like that. So here's the first cam out, and this is the cam that didn't want to spin very easily. And you can see that the journals are just a little bit scarred. Obviously the journals are in the head, but the part of the cam that the journals ride on. And so let's look at this a little bit closer here. So here's the actual journals, and there is a little pitting in there, but they actually don't look too bad. They might need to be line honed again, and but we'll see. As far as the cam goes, the cam caps, those looked a little chewed up, and I could sort of catch my fingernail in there, so it's obviously not happy. And so that's where the head's probably going to have to go to the machine shop. Now, this could have been because the car was most likely run without priming the engine for oil. It sat for 7 years after the fresh build, and that's a possibility of the assembly oil that was on it, assembly lube, might have solidified or not really been protecting it enough, and then this cam might have run for a little bit without any oil in it. That's a theory. I don't know exactly because it's a fresh build, but the car sat for 7 years in storage before it was started the first time. They brought it here to the shop, started it, drove it off the trailer, and put it on the dyno, and that's when my friend said this thing's not running right. So we're going to need to get the head off, and I took out all the head stud nuts, so it does have ARP hardware. It has actual head studs, which is really nice. I mean, this car had everything, no expenses spared. And so I rotated and pushed the coolant that fell into the cylinders out, because when you take the head off, you're going to get some coolant in there. Dried out the cylinders and looked in. It has very nice pistons with valve reliefs. And so I want to give you a little more information at the end of this video, just so you understand a little more of what's going on here. My friend was asked to tune the car. It was in storage for a long time. It came out, it didn't seem to run right. He did a compression test. It had some zero compression cylinders, it had some low compression, had a couple high compression, normal compression cylinders. And so he said, look, we're going to have to work on this and take the valve covers off. He did that at first. He was looking for followers that have popped off of the lashes, which he's seen happen in bent valves. Some kind of damage, broken spring, anything like that, that might suggest that the valves weren't closing all the way. He thought it might have some bent valves in it as well. He's a very, very good mechanic, and so he's done a lot of work. I mean, you can just see around the shop what he does, but basically it came to the point where he thought the head's going to have to come off. We're going to have to probably take the valves out, make sure that they're straight, because obviously it wasn't holding compression. But when we got to this point, we said, well, why don't we take all the followers out? That way all the valves are closed, and we'll compress the cylinders and see if they hold air, and see if there's any air coming out of the intake ports or whatever. And it seemed like it all sealed pretty well. From what we could tell, the valves seemed to have sealed nicely. So we said, well, let's retime it and stuff. And that's when I found that that cam was kind of frozen. It was still turnable by hand, but it was really tight. We were hoping that maybe they just over tightened those cam caps and the cam was being crunched a little bit, and that maybe if we just loosened it and torqued it to spec, that it would spin freely. And as I loosened it, it spun nicely, so there was hope. But then we said, you know what, let's torque it down, which I did, and then it was frozen again. So I said, we better take it all the way out and see what we're dealing with. So we pulled out the cam, and we saw the slight damage to the journals and the cams. And so at that point, we decided it's time to take the head off, go take it to a machine shop, see if they can line hone it and clean up the cam shaft, because we don't even know what cams these are. So that makes things difficult as well. Can't just order one new cam. We were thinking he might just have to get a new set of heads, new cams, and just do it all over. Plus, one of the cam caps I noticed was stripped on one of the bolts that holds the caps down, because I went to take them all off and one of them was super loose, and I thought, oh, that one wasn't even tight. And sure enough, when I went to torque them all down, that one just spun freely. So that's going to have to be addressed as well. And so the theory that I'm having right now is that the car's engine was built so long ago that it was pretty dry when they started it, and now the cams ran without any oil or lubricant on them enough to scar them up a little bit. That's kind of what I'm thinking might be the case here. You should prime an engine with oil before you start it on a fresh build. You can still use assembly oils and things. That's a really good idea, and you should do that. But there's ways to pressurize the oil system. Some people go through the oil filter area with like a pump compressor. My friend said he has a setup he does here in the shop, and so that's what the engine probably needed before they started it, after sitting for 7 years with a fresh engine that hadn't been run yet with oil in it, but who knows how much. That deep sump oil pan too, it takes 9 quarts or so, maybe more, somewhere around there. I have one on my Bullet, and you just have to fill it up a lot extra, and maybe some people don't realize that it takes extra oil than this 5 or 6 quarts that it usually does. So there's a lot of potential things here that we could be dealing with, but so far this is where we've gotten to, and I'm excited to have the head go to the machine shop and hopefully come back okay, and we're gonna put it back together. So I'm just trying to think of all the stuff that we've gone through, because this isn't just a project of like putting some headers on a car or something. This is like a whole drop out, tear down, go through, figure out what's what. It's a highly modified car with wires going everywhere, so you just have to be ready for surprises, and it was kind of a newer process for me too, so it's kind of a learning curve. But my friend, he mostly deals with LS cars. He's really good with the LS and stuff, and so he said he got to thinking about these Mustangs, and he's a little behind in the shop with so much work because he's so good at what he does. He's booked out, and he said, "Hey, Justin, will you come help me with this?" Because he was trying to think of somebody who's into these cars so much, and I was the first person he thought of, and so I'm grateful for that, and I'm honored to come work on this car on the shop and do this project. And so I would like to see the car back together running nicely, and we're going to do everything the best that we can. I showed him how to time the engine and how it should have been and stuff like that, so there's a lot of learning on both ends, so it was just kind of fun. So that's the update for now, and I'll let you know how it goes. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. It's kind of different, but it's fun, and it's in my field of expertise with these new Edge Mustangs. It's my favorite thing. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for more Mustang content.